Rolls-Royce is one of the oldest and most luxurious car and aero-engine companies in the world, worth tens of billions of dollars. But as today's most desirable ultra-luxury ride and a powerhouse in aviation, it's easy to forget its humble beginnings. It all started with an extremely poor engineer who faced countless challenges of poverty and illness on his journey to create the most perfect machines in the world. Despite facing absolute despair, he proved everyone wrong and turned his small workshop into the world's most premium luxury car brand. But what could have simply been a success story of building luxurious carriages took a turn that decided the fate of a nation, when the company practically held the line for the entire Royal Air Force during World War II by building the legendary Merlin aero-engine. So sit back and relax, because today we're going to dive into the crazy story of Rolls-Royce and the man who gave machines a soul through sheer paranoia and perfectionism, Henry Royce. Henry Royce was born in March 1863 in Alwalton, England, into a lower-class family. His father ran a flour mill that barely kept the family afloat before quickly going bankrupt. Then, when Henry was just 9 years old, his father passed away from illness, leaving him and his mother in a terrible financial hole. Needless to say, Royce's childhood was incredibly miserable. He couldn't even afford to go to school, and by age 9, he was already working the streets of London selling newspapers and working as a telegram boy just to survive. Despite living in poverty and barely having enough to eat, his aunt did everything she could to sponsor his education. Thanks to her, even though Henry only had one short year of formal education, he managed to land an apprenticeship at the Great Northern Railway Works. There, at a very young age, he showed incredible talent, especially when it came to mechanics and early electricity. When he was 14, Royce decided to grind and hone his hardcore engineering skills at the railway works. He worked insanely hard there, and later became a pioneering engineer for an electric lighting company entirely through self-study. Royce was quickly recognized as a self-taught genius in Britain's early electrical and mechanical engineering fields. He firmly believed that the shoddily built mechanical equipment of that era needed to be completely phased out. Fueled by his self-education and deep dives into the subject, Royce's interest in precision machinery really started to take off. Being an absolute perfectionist, he began tinkering with all sorts of electrical and mechanical devices, trying every possible method to create more reliable machines. At that time, plenty of engineers and inventors had already started building early automobiles. While some of them did manage to build motorized vehicles, these early cars were ridiculously unreliable. Henry noticed that most of these early vehicles shook violently, were deafeningly loud, and broke down constantly. He quickly realized there was a need for a completely different concept, one that pursued ultimate quietness and reliability. While many initially thought that absolute perfection was impossible, he always believed it could be done. He just needed to get his hands dirty to prove it. So, after racking up electrical experience in his early years, Royce spent the next few years running his own crane and dynamo manufacturing plant. Although he was successful at this, he used everything he earned to kickstart his very own automobile venture. In 1884, at the age of 21, Henry partnered with Ernest Claremont to open an electrical and mechanical workshop in Manchester. Around this time, Royce bought a French Decauville car for commuting, as having a car seemed essential. But unfortunately for Henry, this French car turned out to be incredibly crude and hard to use. It was notoriously difficult to start, vibrated violently, and was super loud, which caused the obsessive-compulsive Royce intense physical and mental pain. Luckily, Henry had unmatched mechanical talent and a fanatic obsession with perfection. As a man with unwavering engineering values, He just couldn't stand seeing such crude machinery exist in the world. So, he decided to use the equipment in his own factory to completely redesign and rebuild the car from the ground up, giving him and his team total control over the precision of every single part. Together, they were able to turn this crude mechanical mess around and spend the next few years chasing ultimate smoothness. Despite all the struggles, it was during this period that Henry was able to showcase his true genius. He made major developments and breakthroughs in his workshop experiments, most notably hand-building 3 incredibly quiet and reliable twin-cylinder Royce 10 cars in 1904. To push for absolute excellence, he also started improving every tiny component of the engine, like the ignition system, the carburetor, and the lubrication system. With these designs, Henry wasn't just getting closer to his dream of building the perfect car. He was also positioning himself to show the world what true British craftsmanship looked like. However, business wasn't as good as he'd hoped. You see, Henry was a pure tech nerd. The cars he built were so insanely expensive to make that hardly anyone even knew his masterpieces existed. This also forced him to lose ground continuously when facing price wars from cheap imported cranes. In the end, Henry was sitting on the best cars in the world, but had 0 sales channels and no fame. To make matters worse, he had absolutely no idea how to pitch his ideas to the wealthy elite. His life's work could have easily died off at any moment due to a broken cash flow. Frustrated and exhausted, Royce just kept grinding away at the tech in his workshop. His lack of business acumen was a heavy blow, but his obsession with perfection made him even more determined to build the best car out there. His long-time, total devotion to mechanics eventually led him to Charles Rolls, a wealthy aristocrat who owned a high-end car dealership in London. Together, they had a historic meeting at the Midland Hotel in Manchester in May 1904. Unlike Henry's previous days of working behind closed doors, this meeting would go down as the greatest partnership in automotive history. Rolls, born into nobility, had a sharp business mind and a deep love for motor racing. When he saw the cars Royce had built, he was absolutely blown away. He finally shifted his main focus to a partnership. Rolls would handle selling the cars, and Royce would focus purely on the engineering. Using Royce's chassis and engines, Rolls decided to take all the cars Royce could produce. In 1906, they officially founded the Rolls-Royce Company and launched the legendary Silver Ghost that very same year. This vehicle was equipped with an inline-6 engine. The engine ran so smoothly that you could balance a coin on the hood and it wouldn't tip over. Royce knew this was revolutionary. After testing and perfecting his vehicle, he rolled it out to the public. However, back then, convincing everyone wasn't easy. While some appreciated his creation, most wealthy buyers were skeptical of this emerging British brand. Many preferred to buy French cars because they worried that British-made cars just weren't as luxurious as those from the continent. They simply couldn't see the practical value in such an insanely expensive car. Why would anyone buy a machine like this? They argued. It was way more expensive than a horse-drawn carriage, and the infrastructure at the time was terrible anyway. Despite all this, Henry Royce was convinced his perfect car was the future, and worked day and night building them. His partner, Charles Rolls, was his biggest marketing champion. Rolls constantly hung out with his high society friends, earning the brand a stellar reputation. But even with added improvements, people still needed a more mind-blowing proof of concept to truly see Royce's vision. On the flip side, the few people who did buy the cars were already completely won over by their astonishing quietness. But they were incredibly expensive, meaning only the absolute wealthiest and most elite could get their hands on them. That being said, One thing was clear. Rolls-Royce needed to convince the world that the best car on the planet had just been born. In 1907, the Rolls-Royce team made a jaw-dropping decision. They embarked on one of the most important reliability test runs in automotive history. They took a car named the Silver Ghost and put it through non-stop reliability trials in Scotland. Instead of treating the car like some fragile luxury item, they drove it day and night over brutal, rough roads. At the time, no car had ever attempted such a grueling journey, but the team was determined to prove the absolute reliability of Royce's invention. However, the trip was no walk in the park. They ran into plenty of issues, navigating through dusty, rocky, and unforgiving roads. The car drove continuously for a staggering 14,371 miles, and during that entire time, it didn't suffer a single mechanical failure, aside from one broken fuel petcock. Most importantly, the trip achieved exactly what the team set out to do, making people realize that Rolls-Royce was the best car in the world. As a result, the Silver Ghost became the talk of the town, generating massive publicity for the company's business. Before long, Rolls-Royce began expanding so rapidly that it essentially became synonymous with ultimate luxury. But with the addition of another key figure, Claude Johnson, who, as managing director, became known as the hyphen in the Rolls-Royce name, the brand's status was quickly cemented. While he handled the business and marketing side of things, Royce could focus more heavily on his engineering goals and was even able to dive into the new world of aero-engines. Rolls-Royce's success in the automotive world was undeniable, quickly becoming the go-to choice for royalty and aristocrats. However, just as Rolls-Royce was basking in its newfound success, it was about to feel the massive pressure of fate and the changing times. In 1910, tragedy struck. Charles Rolls, the aristocratic marketing genius who brought the brand to the world, tragically died in a plane crash during a flying display, becoming the first person in British history to die in an aviation accident. This meant Henry Royce had lost his best partner. To make matters worse, years of insane overworking finally caught up with him, and Royce's health completely collapsed in 1911. Doctors even declared he only had a few months to live. It was obvious the company was facing a massive crisis, but, under the careful care of his nurses, Royce miraculously survived. He set up his own private design studios at his homes in the south of France and southern England. Right while Royce was pushing through his illness to keep working, World War I broke out. The British government demanded that Rolls-Royce pivot to producing aero-engines. This wasn't originally Royce's strong suit, but he applied the same grueling, exacting standards used to build the Silver Ghost to the manufacturing of aircraft engines. He designed the legendary Eagle aero-engine. This engine later even helped humanity complete the first ever non-stop transatlantic flight. This turned Rolls-Royce from just a luxury car maker into a top-tier aerospace power giant. On the flip side, however, the interwar years were filled with turbulence. In the 1920s, to deal with competition and expand their product line, Rolls-Royce acquired their rival, Bentley. Royce, still battling illness, continued to direct every single engineering detail of the company. Even when he couldn't physically go to the factory, he demanded engineers bring the blueprints right to his sickbed for review. His obsession with perfection never compromised, not even to old age or disease. By the late 1920s, Britain was on a losing streak in the Schneider Trophy seaplane races. Using his walking stick, Royce drew out the rough sketch for an entirely new R-type aero-engine right there in the sand on a beach. This monster engine helped Britain completely dominate the Schneider Trophy and smashed the absolute flight speed records of the time. This engine subsequently evolved into the masterpiece that would completely alter the course of world history, the Merlin engine. However, Royce didn't live to see this engine's most glorious highlight. After seeing the massive success of his cars and aero-engines and marveling at how he went from a poor paperboy to a legend knighted as a baronet by the King of England, Henry Royce passed away in April 1933 at the age of 70. After his death, Rolls-Royce's red RR logo was changed to a black background in mourning. Meanwhile, the company's power continued to grow, becoming one of the best powertrain manufacturers in the world. But it played its most critical role in the subsequent Second World War. When World War II broke out in 1939, Britain faced insane bombing raids from the Nazi Luftwaffe, putting the nation on the brink of survival. And what saved the skies of Britain was none other than the Merlin V12 aero-engine built by Rolls-Royce. It was equipped on the famous Spitfire and Hurricane fighter planes. No other company's product had such a decisive impact on the Battle of Britain as the Rolls-Royce engine, a fact that became glaringly obvious in the skies. Starting in 1940, the Royal Air Force, powered by Merlin engines, engaged in desperate, do-or-die dogfights with the Nazi Air Force. They also faced immense production pressure and severe resource shortages. But under absolutely brutal conditions, Rolls-Royce factories ran at full throttle, even dispersing their production lines to avoid being bombed. These successes made Rolls-Royce a hero brand in the anti-fascist war. Even America's P-51 Mustang fighter only became the best Allied escort fighter of World War II because it was retrofitted with license-built Merlin engines. However, as the war came to an end, the Rolls-Royce company soon found that it needed to readapt to a peacetime market. They began resuming the production of civilian luxury cars and made a full-scale push into the civilian aviation jet engine sector. Over the years, despite going through a bankruptcy crisis in 1971 and the splitting up of its car and aviation divisions, the car brand is currently owned by BMW, while the aero-engine business operates independently. The Rolls-Royce name remains the ultimate synonym for the world's most high-end craftsmanship and technology. Whether it's the Boeing and Airbus passenger jets flying in the sky or the Phantom sedans cruising on the highway, they all carry on that incredibly rigorous engineering spirit. Over the years, Rolls-Royce has completely solidified its image, becoming one of the most valuable luxury and aerospace power brands in the world. None of this, however, would have been possible without Henry Royce. Despite his humble beginnings, having practically zero formal education and facing illness alongside countless challenges, he still had the fanatical obsession, courage, and determination to turn the dream of pursuing absolute perfection into a reality. Thanks for watching.